All right. Check one, check two, check three. It's better late than never. Um, so hello everyone. I'm Soren. If you've not met me before, welcome. And if you are a frequent flyer here, welcome back. So today I'm doing a bit of a casual retelling of a long overdue campaign diary. When I first started doing VTubing stuff, one of the first videos I put out was me telling the story of my first D&D campaign I ever ran. This was back when I was in university. It was with a bunch of my university classmates. We were all in the teaching program. And we played for 2 years, and it was a really good time. To give you an extremely high level Cole's Notes, as a group of adventurers that kind of they stumbled upon a demonic summoning ritual where the demon smugly used its ace in the hole on them and then left them there to just suffer, and they were rescued, which gave them immunity to that demon's powers going forward. So it was the journey of them traveling around the world trying to stop this demon. And when we finished that campaign, we were all going to the same teacher's college at the end of our degrees, and we wanted to continue playing together. So I asked them, so what do you want in the next campaign? What do you want your world to be? And they said to me they wanted sky pirates. Which, quite a twist, going from kind of like low magic medieval fantasy all the way up to sky pirates and airships and stuff. So I set about work over the summer, and I built them. I more or less progressed the clock forward 2,000 years in this world, and that's where our story picked up. So if you want the full context to get the most out of it, I'd suggest watching that really old video where I babble for an hour about that campaign, and you'll understand like all the little references and stuff, but I'll point them out as we go and kind of piece everything together. That being said, the reason I have this really crudely drawn map is it was one of the first maps I made using Incarnate, and it was the map that I put together when we were going to start this campaign. So I was using this. I had printed it out on printer paper to mark and to show them where the map was and where they were all at. And I went and revamped it because it's something, isn't it? It's pretty butt ugly. So here's the revamped version, and as you can see here, there's a lot going on. I have my tokens on. I'm going to approach this kind of like a podcast thing, so feel free to minimize the video and just listen to me. All you're really going to be missing out on if you're not watching the screen is me just shuffling tokens around, showing you things. But there's not any like crazy visuals. So I'll introduce the cast first. So we had Captain Azer, a Dragonborn Fighter Bard multi-class. So this guy is a sky pirate captain who he's basically in this world. There are airships, but it's highly regulated. So like all the travel has to go through government approvals and stuff. There's like very dedicated ships only fly at these times. So there's, in terms of criminals, there's a lot of smuggling and low flying and sneaking around with your smaller ships. And that's what Captain Azer was known for. He's a well-skilled pilot, and he's got a small crew, and he liked to smuggle people from island to island in the sky. Next up we have Fenway, who was a half-elf monk. She put her character as a Way of the Elements monk. She was a big fan of Avatar, so she wanted her character to play like that. Then we have Cyrus, who wanted to be a high elf necromancer, and for some reason didn't realize necromancy was one of the wizard options at the time, so he actually started the campaign as a uh, I think it was Death Domain cleric from the Dungeon Master Guide, and then we talked it over, and I let him convert his character over to a wizard, necromancy school wizard. So that's what he is, a necromancy school wizard. Then we had another high elf rogue who was a arcane trickster, and he was kind of like a notorious thief. And finally we have Hawks, who was a wood elf ranger who had a pet falcon that he named Millennium. It was that player's first time playing D&D ever. He was my roommate when I was living away from home at teacher's college. So there's a lot of different experience levels and expectations on this, and we only had a year to get this campaign done. So things moved at a pretty high pace, and we were just trucking right along. But yeah, so that's our cast here. And now I will move us on to our proper map. Yeah. So the first thing that happened, and kind of like the first hurdle we had to get over as a group, was everyone wanted to play more like edgy, self-centered characters that they're not really team players, they're in it for themselves. So I needed something to act as the glue for the party. So what ended up happening was they all happened to be passengers on Azer's ship. So you had Azer as the captain here. These three were clients, along with two others. You had a bard named Oliver. I'm just going to extend his portrait out so you can get a look at him. And then you had just like a drunkard rich guy named Axel that was also traveling around on smuggler ships, just living his life. And then you had Azer's crew, who they were unnamed, but there's about 4 of them. So they're just going along on Azer's ship, the Red Scale, and they see that there's another ship that's sinking into the clouds called the Lost Maiden. So Azer, seeing an opportunity, swoops down. He's like, this is just easy pickings. If this ship's in danger and there's no one on it, let's just help ourselves. So they start going into the ship and they're picking it over. They find there's a lot of dead bodies. They don't know why or what happened. But as they're doing this strange red-eyed monster cloaked in darkness just appears before them, and it's hovering there, and they're all affected by a curse that this thing places on them. I named it Iris but like spelt it weird. Hee hee. So basically, the party was locked into this death curse where they had 1 year to break the curse, or their souls were forfeit to the creature. So the party, realizing that, we're all screwed if we don't work together to try and break this curse, they end up forming a group, and they travel to the city of Fliege with some of Azer's crew. Kind of like drags the Lost Maiden along with them to Fliege, and their first order of business is getting the 2 ships set up. So that all happens. The eye monster appears and then disappears before them, and they set foot on the first continent. And the first step that comes within the party in terms of recommendations on where to start on breaking the curse is this bard, Oliver. Oliver is this he's a bit of a fanatic for a certain bard in the world named Millie. Now, Millie was actually a character from the last campaign who she came to be known as the Immortal Bard. She carries with her a resurrection stone, which actually stopped her aging process and has allowed her to live for thousands of years while maintaining her youth. So she's become world famous. She travels the world. She plays shows. She's a well of knowledge for anything, and she's a great performer, beloved by the common folk. Um, so Oliver, being a massive fan of her, thinks she'll know something about this creature, and he recommends that the group goes on a chase to try and track down Millie and ask her for help. So the party's like, you know what? That sounds like a really good starting place. Let's do that. And the last known spot where Oliver was actually traveling to for her show was a town called Gewick. So the group lands in Fliege and they travel north up to Gewick, where they find that Millie had actually moved on to the next spot on her tour, which was across the sky in Zraka. All this space in between the land masses is supposed to be like sky and clouds. There's no actual water there. Water is actually a pretty tight resource up in the Sky Islands. Yeah. So the group they travel up to Gewick, and they meet this dwarven man named Kelver, who is a renowned artisan. And he's really good with mechanical pieces. He works on airships, but he's been in a bit of a slump. And he's kind of looked to as one of the leaders of the town, because of his intellect. And he asks the party, he kind of strikes a deal with them. He says, look, I'll fix up that other airship for you for free, and I'll mount an experimental cannon on your ship, the Red Scale. If you go into the mines and take care of the creature that took up residence in there. So the group's like, you know what? That sounds like a fantastic deal. Let's do it. They go into the mines. They fight their way through some little creatures, and they're eventually ambushed by a bullet, which is like a big four-legged land shark type of creature that's in really heavy. It's got like heavy plated. I wouldn't call it armor, but like its skin's just so tough it's like armor. And Axel keeps getting in the way, and he nearly dies because he's just a drunk layabout. So the party's like saving Axel and also fighting this thing, and they eventually kill it. And they go back to Kelver. Kelver does the repairs, and then they kind of like soft kidnap Kelver. They're like, "You should come with us," and just kind of take off with him. So Kelver originally kind of begrudgingly joins the party, but yeah, they travel together and they go to Zraka. Kelver eventually like kind of realizes this is a really good opportunity to kind of improve my skills as an artisan. He's down with it. He kind of like accepts what's up. So you have Azer piloting the Red Scale, with most of the group traveling with him. You had Ox and Cyrus piloting the Lost Maiden, along with the other group, and Kelver's with them all. So they go to Zraka, and this becomes kind of like the theme. It's like a weekly little game that we were playing, where every time that they got to a town, it'd turn out Millie had moved to the next town, and they're on a goose chase trying to chase her down. So they get to Zraka, and they find that out. So they're like, okay, well, let's go to Andford, which is the next city in the rotation. So they start traveling to Andford, and Andford was known as like one of the main skyports. And most flights to other countries would leave out of Andford. So the party kind of brings the Lost Maiden back to Azer's. Azer had like a secret base that was located roughly in this area here that he would use as his hideout, and it's like just peeking out from underneath. There's like a barrier of clouds that blocks out the sky from below. So his little hideout is like just peeking out of the sky, the cloud barrier. So he brings that back. He leaves Kelver there because Kelver's decided that he's big chillin'. He's fine with what they're up to. And the rest of them continue to chase Millie. So they get to Andford. Millie's already moved on to her next stop. And as they're here, the party decides everyone in the group should have their own airship, which was a hilarious twist that I, as a DM, was not ready for. So the group hatches this plan where they're going to break into the military base in Anford and steal one of the airships. So to do so, they blow one of the airships up. And in the chaos, they all board a smaller airship. So Azer and Hawks and Volus and Cyrus, these 5 take off in the Falcon. First they drop Azer back in Thraka so that he can grab his the red scale. And then the other 3 run back to his base. So most of the party gets split up, or the party really splits up here. And one of the cool things that they find when they steal the Falcon is it turns out that they had the kind of like the Sky military. They were using hippogriffs as their like auxiliary mounts. So like you'd have like the ship come in, and then you'd have their soldiers mount up on hippogriffs and fly off of the deck to go and skirmish with other sky ships and that kind of thing. So they found that this was actually a carrier for hippogriffs, so they actually scored a ton of hippogriffs for their group as well, which will come important later. The other weird thing that was going on, though, is Fenway and Axel kind of had like this little side thing happening. So when they arrived in Anford, Axel refused to participate in the military base thing, right? Which, to be honest, is pretty reasonable. It's pretty stupid to just attack a military base for shits and giggles. But here we are, doing stupid things, because that's what D&D is all about sometimes. Yeah, so Axel chooses to go to the tavern, and he drinks, and he's just chilling. He's trying to keep a low profile. He's got his hood up. He knows this town super well, and Fenway decides that she's going to stay with him and see what he's up to. And then the big commotion happens, and they blow up the port. City's in chaos. Everyone's running around, and Axel gets really scared for a moment when he sees this guy, Bo, run past him. Just extend his picture out. So Fenway thinks this is weird. Bo doesn't take any notice of them as he's like running around trying to deal with the fact that his base is under attack. And the other 2 escape the city in the chaos, and they head towards Verdensend, deciding that continuing to track Millie was the best way to go. And also, Axel said if they made it all the way to the city called Weak Belly, he'd be able to hook them up with an airship to get back to the others. Because they didn't have any plan in place to reconnect. Like, they blew up the airship, took off, and then like they just kind of acted like a hive of bees until they all got back to their nest. But these 2 are still kind of like lost to the wind. So they continue chasing Millie as she's traveling around from town to town. Axel chose to skip over staying in Verdensend. He was just, no, we're not going there, I'm out. Which was really weird to Fenway. So they get to Felagard. Once again, Millie's continued on. But while they're in Felagard, as they're staying at the inn there, Axel explains that he's actually the son of the king in Verdensend. And Bo is his older brother. So Axel's mother died when she's giving birth to him. And his father blames him for the death of his love. Or his beloved. And Bo blames him for killing their mother. Even though that was not, like, he had nothing to do with it. Not the kid's fault at all. But they blame him because they need to direct their anger at someone. So Axel, after years of trying to live up to being a prince, decided that he would just live up to their expectations instead. So he became a gambler, a drunkard, a wanderer. He never introduces himself as a prince or anything. He's just Axel. He's out there living his best life, trying to numb the misery of his upbringing. So Fenway's really moved by this. She makes her really sad to hear, but it also has given them their connections to the underground, so to speak. So they continue on their quest. I was really light on like intercity problems. I never really jumped them with monsters or anything because we were trying to move. We only got to play once a month, and we all had placements and stuff. So like this campaign only happened over like, I think we got 8 sessions in before we had to wrap it up. So Fenway and Axel, they get down to Quig Belly. This was like a private session because the player for Fenway was busy during one of the sessions. And then they find, once again, Millie had moved on, but they find out that Millie had gone over to the Elven cities, and she is making her rounds there. So Axel, using his connections, he introduces Fenway to some shady smugglers that pilot a ship called the Bottom Feeder, and he pays them a hefty amount of gold to allow the two of them passage on the Bottom Feeder and drop them off at the pirate hideout. So they're traveling along with these thieves, or these smugglers, and they were warned, don't look under deck. Like, don't go down there. You don't get to see what we're up to. Fenway, being curious, decides that she's going to look underneath. And it turns out that they're smuggling people. They've got all these women and children in cages, and it's just a shitty situation down there. And this group's looking to sell them into slavery. So Fenway's like, this is fucking bullshit. I'm gonna fight them. And she starts trying to free all the captees, and she's fighting the people on deck. And it's not going very well. Axel, out of feeling an obligation and a certain kinship with her, decides that he's gonna fight with her as well. So there's this big scuffle that breaks out on the deck, and they're fighting and fighting and fighting. And as this is going on, a big old silver dragon comes up, who I'm going to retrieve the token because I didn't have that on hand. Oops. So the big old dragon comes in, and it lands on the deck, and it neutralizes the smugglers. He eats them. He damages the ship terribly, and then he starts talking to the two of them, and they're like, oh, like, you guys were saving these slaves. I love humans. I have an appreciation for them. I hate that this is the thing that was happening. Where do you want me to drop the Bottom Feeder? And they're like, oh, can you bring us to this spot that's like way off? It just peeks out of the clouds. And the dragon's like, yeah, no problem, but I want a favor in return. And they're like, oh, okay, interesting. And what do you want? And he's like, well, come down to my lair down on the surface under the clouds, and I'll explain it further. But bring backup. And they're like, okay, this is weird, but we don't really have another option. If we say no, he'll just, like, the ship will just fall, so we're just gonna play along. So the Bottom Feeder arrives. Silvarius introduces himself, says, I'll see you guys later for that deal. And the rest of the party's like, what did you do? What deal did you make? And they're like, we don't know what we agreed to. But he did warn us, if we double cross him, he'll come after us. So Silvarius disappears. That's the name of the dragon. I don't know if I introduced him because I'm kind of just babbling and you guys are along for the ride. Yeah, so Silvarius disappears under the clouds, and the group gets Kelver working on fixing up the Bottom Feeder. He's kind of like updating the Lost Maiden so that it's a proper ship. Make sure the Falcon's in working order. So they're all piling back into the Red Scale as a group and making their rounds. And they decide that their best next move would be to go and deal with whatever deal they just made with the dragon, because there's no sense in making multiple enemies. But before they leave, one of the funniest little curse moments that I've had in a campaign happens. So, rescuing a slave ship, you would expect them to just let the people go back to your lives, or we'll find you a safe place. No. Cyrus and Volus, our rogue and our necromancer, say, oh no, you guys misunderstand. You weren't saved. You're just under new management. You're going to be working on our ships because we need crews. We won't beat you or do anything terrible to you. We'll feed you. You get 3 square meals a day. We just need you to work the ships. And the people are like, well, it's what was going to happen to us, and we don't really have a choice. So we're going to stay on this island and work on the ships with you. So they've been kind of accruing like a little bit of a captured crew. I'm just realizing that they did this. Like, they just kept kidnapping people and making them work on the ships. First Culver, and then the people from the bottom feeder. So yeah. Anyway, the group deals with that. They head on down to go see Silvarius. So they fly their ship down, and they find that he's located in these ruins that sit roughly underneath the continent that Verdensend and Andford are on. This land underneath looks like huge tracts of land were just ripped from the surface and thrown into the sky. And I'll explain the reasoning for that when we get there. But basically, what Silvarius explains to them when they meet him, like the group comes in, they meet up with Silvarius, and when they go into his hoard, it's just junk. He loves collecting just random shit that humans drop. The people that live up in the Skylands have just been dumping their shit off the side. So, like, they don't really have waste. Like, they wouldn't have, like, a landfill or any place that they're dealing with their waste. They just throw it off the continent into the clouds. And it's been falling down here, and Silvarius collects it, and he's almost, I call him a weeb for human culture. Like, he loves the people above, even though he never goes up to visit because he doesn't want to scare them. But he loves collecting their art, their weapons, like, you name it, he loves collecting it. So when the party goes down to meet up with him and they find this weird hoard of random crap that he's collected, they're just like, okay, like, we can get behind this. This guy's pretty chill. And the job that he has for them is there's some crevices in the back of his lair that he can't get into anymore because he's just gotten too big. And I forgot that silver dragons can polymorph and turn into people size, so that doesn't come up in the plot. So anyone that's pretty quick on dragon lore, my bad. So the party has to go into like the deeper part of his hoard and fight off a bunch of elementals had appeared in there, destroying his collection and causing his stuff to burn up, and they're agitating him. They'll come out and attack him, and then he'll drive them back in because he's a dragon. But he wants them killed, and he can't get them because they're hidden. So the party goes in and they fight. It turns out it's a big fire elemental. And Azur, during the fight, gets his sword stuck in the elemental. And when they kill it, to give him a magic sword, because I'd been pretty stingy on magic items, he got a Flamberg out of it. So his sword was reforged using a fire elemental's heart to turn to a flaming sword. So I thought that was pretty cool. And just because I just realized I forgot to mention something. As a bard, Azur was using a set of bagpipes that fire came out of the pipes on. Just a cool little side note about that guy. Yeah, so the group deals with the infestation of elementals in Silvarius' hoard. He says, alright, our debt's paid, I'm happy. Here, you guys can have this random treasure chest of stuff. And he gives them like a chest with other magic items. So there's a cape of Mount Blanc, which Fenway takes. And there's a wand of fireballs, which was a huge mistake for me to hand out, because every encounter going forward was completely minimized by the rogue, the arcane trickster, using that thing on everything because there's 7 charges on it. So the group, they travel, they get on their ship, and as they're flying back up, they encounter a pair of tieflings in a hot air balloon. Um, so they kind of like stop them and they're like, "What you guys doing?" And they're just like flying along beside them. And they're like, "Oh, we're on our top secret mission. We're gonna go and we got words for the king and we're emissaries from the lands below." And they're like, "Okay, we're just gonna grab you." And they bring they bring this pair of tieflings back to their base as well. Um, and they get some deeper details around what they're up to. And it turns out that these two, Xylia and Malkar, are on a quest to basically stop Verdensend and Andford from throwing their random bullshit off the side of the continent, because the impact that has on them is basically they get random bombardment attacks just whenever. Like, they have no idea when it's coming, and shit just falls from the sky and destroys their cities, and it's a massive problem. So the party's like, okay, well, Axel revealed to us that he's a prince, so maybe he can get you in to see the king if you help us. And so the tieflings are like, all right, we're down with that. Let's make a deal. And Axel's like, oh, this is bullshit, because I definitely wasn't planning on seeing my father anytime soon. So the tieflings join the group. They follow him around in their hot air balloon, like their Team Rocket. And this big crew of characters shows up in the Elven cities, and they start chasing Millie. Millie had already moved on through 2 of the towns, and she was doing her performance in Flatalos. And the party finally, after I think it was like 6 or 7 sessions at this point, catches up to her. So they go to the tavern that she's performing at. They see her, and Oliver gets really pissed off because it turns out this isn't actually Millie that they've been chasing. It's an imposter. So the party's like, are you fucking kidding me? What do you mean? He's like, yeah, she's a really impressive imposter. Like, only a true fan would notice something's off. And so the party calls her out on it, and she escapes, because it turns out that she's been charming, this imposter Millie has been charming the local guards to come to her defense if she's ever in danger. Her charm magic's working on not the elves, but like other forest people. I believe I was using the lizard folk as her guards during this. So the group starts following Millie through the woods. She escapes into some abandoned ruins south of the town. They fight their way through. There's shambling mounds. There's other random plant life. There's lizard folk, the whole 9 yards. And they get to the ruins that Millie are in. The 2 tieflings deciding that they're going to take their hot air balloon and follow above, in case like she comes back out to the main road, and like kind of like keep an eye in the sky down on the woods. But the party kind of surrounds her, and they lock her down in the ruins. But then her magical music, she's using that. She charms the entire party, and she's about to start like making them fight each other. And the party's in a terrible spot. They've more or less lost this encounter. Luckily, the tieflings are above, and they start bombing the ruins that Millie took hole up in, and they break the spell by breaking Millie's concentration. So the group, they're freed. They manage to capture the imposter, and they start interrogating her, being like, who the fuck do you think you are? What are you doing? We've been chasing you for, like, in game it would have been like a couple months at this point. We need to know where the real Millie is. She's like, I don't know, I just know she was gone, so I took her place because I can pull off a good imitation of her. She introduces herself as Rubella. The group chats with her a little bit, and they basically make an agreement that she'll use her magic, because she is a very powerful bard in her own regard. Like, she's not as powerful as Millie, but she's quite strong. And she's able to use the spell Legend Lore to track Millie's location. So she's able to tell the party that Millie is actually down on the surface in the back of this swampy wasteland called Sigdom. So the group is like, thank God we know where the real Millie is now. So let's go down to Sigdom and find them down there. And in return, they just let the imposter go. They're like, stop imitating her. You're talented enough, and you're gonna get yourself in bigger trouble with worse people if you keep that up. So Rubella's like, all right, well, no worries. I'm gonna keep on keeping on, and probably doesn't change her way. We never revisit her. So the party squares up with the red scale. The tieflings go with them. They go back to the pirate fort. Kelver's done all his upgrades, so you got the Lost Maiden, the Falcon, the Bottom Feeder. Cyrus is flying on the Bottom Feeder. You got Azer on the red scale. Fox is on the Falcon. Volus is on the Lost Maiden, along with the two tieflings that have brought their bombs with them. And then these three are on the red skill, Fenway, Oliver, and Axel. So they all get into their ships and they decide that they're going to start heading towards the place that was pointed out to them. So the group's flying along, they're going through the sky, and it's time for them to get their comeuppance for ambushing that military base. Because as they leave and they get out to like kind of like neutral area out in the clouds, they're cut off by Bow with their flagship, the King's Ring. And like a full fleet, they've pulled out all the stops to crush these guys for what they did. So you got the flagship that kind of shoots some harpoons out and latches onto the red scale. You have all these side ships coming in and locking horns with the other guys. The main party brings their ships in close to the red scale and they all kind of congregate on the same deck. So Bo and his adventuring party, where he's got like a really, I forget their names, but there's like a tanky knight guy that backed up Bo. There's an enchantress that was in love with the knight. There's a edgy elven archer that hung out with them. Along with like all kinds of just like rank and file soldiers. Bo was also riding on the back of a bronze dragon for this. Like they're pulling out all the stops. So Silvarius, noticing this as he's admiring the skies from below, he sees the bronze dragon. He comes to back up the party. So a big war breaks out between the two groups, and they're going all in. One of the key things that happen during this is the enchantress on Bo's side uses Dominate Person on Volus. Volus is the guy that had the wand of Fireball that's been wiping every encounter nonstop. Now, it's kind of shitty of me to like use a little bit of meta knowledge on it, but I needed that fire wand gone. Otherwise, like everything else going forward in the campaign would probably just be negligible. So she casts Dominate Person on him, and she makes him throw his equipment overboard, and it starts hurtling through the sky. So he finally breaks free of the domination spell, and he jumps off the side of the ship, and he is like, he's like parachuting down without an actual chute, trying to catch his items. And after that session, Volus, like the player for Volus, got too busy to play with us, so he had to drop out of the campaign. So that was actually the way that Volus ended up going out and leaving our gaming group was they never saw him again. He just fell out from the ship. He made this mad dash down through the clouds and disappeared. And the party's like, oh my god, like Volus is actually dead now. And the fight just rages on. Silvarius chases the bronze dragon off. The two of them like tussle through the sky. They dip under the clouds. It's a whole thing. Bo's group and all the rank and file soldiers are defeated. And they take Bo captive. And Axel, in an act of jealousy and anger, mutilates Bo's arms so that he like goes after the tendons inside his arms so that he could never wield a weapon or like write or anything again. He can't use his hands anymore. So Bo does that, or Bo has that happen to him. Axel more or less ruins his brother's life. And then they hand Bo over to the tieflings, and they're like, here's a bargaining chip for you to fight with the kingdom with. And they're like, okay, well, this is probably a extremely valuable bargaining chip, probably better than anything that we could come up with, so we'll just take that and go. So they go back to their city back home, and the group continues on in their ships. They commandeer the King's Ring that Fenway takes a pilot ship of. And the 4 ships now, the Tieflings took the Lost Maiden, move in towards the location they were given by Rubella. And you'll notice, I kind of accidentally went down to look at it earlier, this big old sky whale, this Bismarck looking boy. So the first challenge that the group encounters trying to access where Millie is this giant wind elemental, which is it was named Cirrus, and it basically summoned a storm to protect the location from above. And the group gets into they have to use their ships instead of their characters to battle Cirrus. So all those cannons and like interesting weaponry that they had mounted onto their stuff, thanks to Kevlar, are come into handy here. They go to war with Cirrus, they defeat him, and Cirrus goes, all right, this isn't worth me dying over, so I'll stop the storm and get out of here if you guys agree to complete your mission, because I don't want to end up on the other side of the problem. And the group just goes, okay, sounds good. We weren't planning on losing, so cool. And they descend through the cloud barrier, safe from the storms of Cirrus, and they make it down to Sigdom. And even though Cirrus agreed to get rid of the storms, they do find themselves facing another difficulty. Oops, wrong tab. So yeah, they've made their way down to Sigdom. They find that even with Cirrus not actively making their life harder, they can't really properly use the ships. So what they do is they dismount and they take the hippogriffs from the Falcon, and they try to fly in low through the bog, and they reach this cave with that's guarded by a black dragon, who they kind of convince to. Things got a little crazy here, and it's a little hazy, but they basically coaxed the dragon out of his cave and blew him up. They more or less fooled him. They to severely weaken him, and then they just finished him off. I really wish I remembered more, because I remember it being a really wild moment. I just don't remember what they actually did, so my apologies on that retelling faux pas. I didn't have it anywhere in my notes. You'll see there's a lot of little tokens here. So the group, they leave the hippogriffs outside, they go inside this big spire, and they're greeted by a woman that's a spellcaster that uses the power of the stars, and she's paired up with a dark knight, and these were actually the first two. They're based off the two classes that I started my D&D book off with, and this was actually the catalyst for how I ended up making the Final Fantasy D&D book. Was I wanted to use the Astrologian as a character, but there's obviously nothing for it out there, so I made one. And then I wanted to use a Dark Knight, and there wasn't really one that fit what I was looking for, so I just made the Final Fantasy Dark Knight for D&D as well. Made character sheets based off that, and then had the party fight those. Both of them, it turns out, are the children of a woman called Iris from the prior campaign. If you know who Iris is from watching that last video, she was this absolutely wild, unmanageable mage. She sought destruction and knowledge in equal parts. Like, you could be talking to her and she would just light you on fire for the sake of it. She would pickpocket even though she didn't know how, and get caught immediately, and then cause a jail riot to break out. Like, she's chaos incarnate, that woman. So they find out that these two half-dragon children that they dealt with, it turned out the father was the black dragon that they killed on their way in, and then the mother was Iris. And their sole purpose in life was to defend their mother as she was doing her stuff down here in Morkimmel in Sigdom. So the group defeats the twin children, and they find Millie. She's inside this enchanted bird cage that has like a glyph inside it that stops her from casting. It's a silence field inside the cage. So they bust her out of there. Millie thanks them because like she was screwed. She had nothing. She couldn't get out. And no one knew where she was, and she would have died down there. So the party's asking her like, whoa, like what the fuck is all this? Like, can you explain yourself? And Millie starts to unravel a series of unfortunate events that culminated in the land literally being ripped apart. So Millie is immortal, and over time all of her friends ended up passing away. She was the last one still around, and as much as she tried to not let it bother her, it obviously did a lot. So she would spend her time traveling the land, just learning about things and people and performing. Just really she almost became almost like a goddess of knowledge for the land. And she would impart this knowledge through song wherever she went. And one particular artifact that she took note of was called the Eye of Iris, and it was something that Iris had actually built back in her back while she was still alive. And rumor had it could grant wishes. So Millie, who deeply missed her friends, wanted her companions back. So she uses the Eye of Iris to wish for her friends to be returned to life so that she can travel with them again. And what it does is it brings Iris back fully alive, and the others as like undead thralls to Iris. So Iris captures Millie and puts her in this birdcage and then sets about her plan. Turns out Iris had ambitions to harness the power of the big bad from the last campaign, Menhir. He was like this big tree that had a crystal in it, and when they defeated him, one of their companions, Eisen, dispelled his spirit to get rid of like Menhir himself, but his power still kind of remained in his domain. And Iris wanted to open a portal up to that domain and absorb the power into herself, so that she could more or less rule the world. She's looking for worldwide power, because she's just this chaotic monster that wants to destroy everything. So she gets She loops in this black dragon to back her up. They set about this multi-millennia plan that started to culminate 2,000 years after they put it in motion, where she would have children that could live over 1,000 years with the dragon. The dragon would protect their home. When the time was right, she'd be resurrected by Millie, because she made the relic specifically to benefit her. Because the thing about the wish granting relic, the Eye of Iris, any wish made on it has to benefit Iris in some way. So that she always comes out on top. And then she put the rumors out there, and she hid the eye out there in some special workshop that she set up. It's very intricate, her planning. And then Millie eventually did find it years later because she's a sentimentalist, and Iris knew she could take advantage of that. So the group, Millie is too weak to fight, but she confirms if they defeat Iris, they could break their curse because it was her creation that cursed them and was gathering souls to open up the portal to Morkimmel. So the group's like, all right, we're in. Let's ascend the tower then. And they continue going up. They next meet the former party as undead thralls, and they defeat them. And then they reach the top of the tower. And during this travel up the tower, only 5 of them could progress up. So the group that ended up facing off with Iris was you had Azer, Fenway, Hawk, Cyrus, and Oliver joined them, with Axel tending to Millie, and making sure that the hippogriffs were okay outside the tower. So they meet up with Iris. Iris doesn't really monologue to them because she's like, I don't need to. I don't know who you guys are. You're just here to get in my way. I'm just gonna kill you and continue on with my plans. So she manages to open the portal to Morkimmel, and she absorbs some of the power, and it causes her body to change. And she turns into this multi-headed dog monster that can levitate and fly around and shit. So she's like half woman, half Cerberus, intense magical power. The party's trapped on this roof of the tower, and she starts flying. And I had retooled her to be a warlock because I was basing all this off of like the classes. I had this really bad habit early on to homebrew everything. I had to homebrew all my monsters from scratch because I didn't know that you could buy books that had all the stat blocks, because I was 100% self-taught. Which led to a lot of problems, but it also led to some cool moments like this. So they're fighting this warlock who she's levitating, or not levitating, she's flying 300 feet away from them. So nothing they have can actually get to her, and she's using Eldritch Blast because she has like the really buffed up Eldritch Blast, the classic warlock build. So she's able to hit them from 200 feet away, 300 feet away, dealing bonus damage, and her attacks have a knockback. So the party's sitting there just trying to dodge her attacks and not get knocked off the tower, because that's what she's trying to do. She's just trying to knock them off so that they fall to their death. All around her tower, save for the bridge to get in, is all jagged rock and magma. You know, like very classic, ooh, I'm the big bad kind of thing. So the party's trying to fight her. They realize that they can't win in this situation. So they call for the hippogriffs, and the hippogriffs fly up, and they all mount up, and they start chasing Iris around in the sky using their hippogriffs. And the true fight kind of breaks out when they're up there doing battle. They're flying around. Arrows and magic bolts are flying all over. Fenway and Azer are struggling because they're both kind of more focused on the melee piece. So what ends up happening is Fenway uses her Cape of Mount Blanc to blink and land on the back of Iris, and she knocks her unconscious. Like, she stuns her because she's a monk. She's spamming her stunning strike and basically driving her towards the ground. So they knock her out and she's free falling, but Fenway's still on her back and she's falling into like jagged rocks and magma. Like, there's no way she survives this because she can't blink back out. She doesn't have proper. I believe I was ruling it so that the Cape of Mount Blanc only worked once, or she didn't have enough charges. Either way, she was stuck on it. So Azer is flying alongside the two of them, free falling through the sky on the back of the hippogriff, just like giving it his all. And she's keeping this, she's keeping Iris just kind of stun locked and just driving her down. At the last second, she jumps off, jumps onto Azer's hippogriff. He swoops up out of danger. Iris just hits the spikes in the magma and just dies. And their curse was broken at that point, and the party's just relieved. They're able to breathe easy, take a step back, and appreciate what happened. And then what they decide to do as their final order of business as a group is they bring Axel back to Verdensend. And we kind of skimmed over this. They didn't play this out, but I asked them, well, what would your next plan be? What would you want to do before you went your ways? And they decided that they would bring Axel back home. They would distract the guards, and Axel kills the king. With Bo missing and Axel being the next born son, he's the rightful heir to the throne. So they get a man who rules the Skylands as their very close friend before they all part, and Axel has to do a real crash course in how to run a country at that point. But yeah, it was a really fun short campaign. I feel like it wasn't as well thought out as our first campaign, but it was like, again, I had a lot of fun, and I think the guy that played for the first time really enjoyed it. Everyone seemed to enjoy their time playing. And yeah, like, I don't have deep insights into like lessons learned. I guess the key ones is, I guess the best lesson learned that I walked away with was how to get self-interested characters to work together. And I found the best way to do it was the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That seemed to work best in this case, and if I were in this situation again, I would probably smooth things out a little more and let things simmer if I had more time. But I'd happily take that same approach. Because they had a lot of cool ideas, and as a DM, I wanted them to explore them. Because at the end of the day, the DM wins when the players have fun. But yeah. I am going to end it off there. Thanks for sitting with me for an hour, listening to me talk about a campaign from 6 years ago. Next time I do this, I'll probably talk about my Final Fantasy campaign I ran. That was a campaign I ran with my free company, or guild if you don't play Final Fantasy, where we had a lot of people rotating out as we played through it, but it was set in the events after patch 3.3 back in the days of Heaven's Ward on Final Fantasy 14, the critically acclaimed MMO. So look forward to that. I also want to do more frequent campaign diaries that are more detailed for the game that I'm running right now. So I'll make a gut call on how I want to approach that. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, or night, or afternoon, whatever you're doing. But keep your stick on the ice and have a good one. Catch y'all later.